Brad Ward, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Wilkinson. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm excellent. Finally have you here in my kind of double studio space. Let me get my other glasses on so I can see something here.
I'm glad to be here.
So we met what, months ago? It had to be many months ago, right?
Not
Uh,
many, a few.
a couple, yeah. So we were at a theater and you and your husband Sanj were sitting next to me, and you seem like a fun guy. You told me a little what you're about, and I thought podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let's jump into it. Tell us a little about yourself, where you grew up, your coming out story, kind of jump into it, and just then I'll jump in and ask questions as we go along.
Sure. So I'm Brad Ward. I live in Palm Springs, and I am a professional certified coach and nonprofit consultant for a living. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and my coming out story actually starts when I was about 7 years old. We were watching All in the Family, and it was the episode where Edith's cousin is coming to visit and he's gay. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. And during a commercial break, my mom turned to me and she said, "Do you know what gay is?" And I said, "Yes, it's when a man loves a man or a woman loves a woman." And she said, "No, it's homosexual." I didn't know what a homosexual was, but I knew I couldn't be one if that's what reaction I would get from my mom.
Wait, so as a kid, you gave that definition, which was a great definition, but she rejected that.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And that was at age 7. So I even knew back then that I was gay. Fast forward many years to through high school and college, I was the best little boy in the world, as it were. I always got good grades. I never really got in trouble with my parents because I grew up Southern Baptist. So we were at church every time the door was open. And I became quite well known because my dad was a deacon, my mom was on church staff. And so, I was in the public eye a lot growing up in that church. I went to Oklahoma Baptist University, thinking that I was going to be a minister of music in a Baptist church. During my senior year at college, my advisor pulled me aside and said, "If you can make a living doing anything other than music, do it." And I was horrified. And I said, "Am I that bad?" And he said, "No, it's not about your skill. It's about you are limited in what you can do if you want to be a musician. Don't be limited." I didn't understand that at the time. I was devastated because I was still struggling with my sexuality. I knew I was going on to seminary the next year, but I didn't know what was beyond that. And I was just thrown into a tailspin. So graduated college with my music degree in hand.
Well, wait a minute. So is he saying that from a don't be a struggling artist viewpoint or what?
Yeah, I think he was because he was able, even though he was still a musician in his probably 50s or 60s at that time, he had been able to parlay that into quite a successful career. He was on staff at the Crystal Cathedral. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yes. So he was the music guy at the Crystal Cathedral for a while. And
Now is that in California or Tech? It's
I was
California,
in
isn't it?
California, and I
Yeah,
was in
yeah.
school in Oklahoma. So
Okay.
he was well compensated enough to be able to buy a plane to fly back and forth from Oklahoma to California every week.
He bought
And
a plane?
y- yes,
Wow.
yeah. So he was not doing too badly for himself, but he recognized that not everybody gets that chance.
Right.
So his intentions were great. I wish that the conversation had happened a little differently, but the tailspin was probably one of the best things that I could have happened.
So what happened with you? What'd you do with that info?
I went to seminary for a year. In that 1 year of seminary, I also could not stop thinking, I've got to understand this gay thing. I've got to understand it better. And so I started going out to gay bars and making friends in the gay community. And about springtime, just right about spring break, that year I was in seminary, I suddenly became very sick. And I thought, shit, I've read about this AIDS thing. And oh my gosh, I hope that I haven't contracted HIV. Fortunately, it was not HIV. But what it did for me was it made me stop and rest. It was mononucleosis. Who at 22 years old gets mononucleosis? Except me.
Well, maybe somebody that's kissing boys. I don't know.
Maybe so. Yeah. Who could that have been? But the 2 weeks that I had to spend resting and recovering from that terrible, terrible illness gave me a chance to think and gave me a chance to say, why am I pursuing seminary if I know I'm gay and I don't want to pursue this Baptist life that I was given? So after I recovered, I dropped out of all my classes and told my parents I was done with school and went in search of a job. And that was that. And it was during that year in seminary that I had my first kind of boyfriend. And he'd met my parents. He was also in seminary. So finally, after mono, I've dropped out of school and everything. I said, okay, it's time for me to come out to my parents. And I'd called my sister and said, Harry, I'm about to come out to mom and dad. And she was like, what? I said, yeah. She said, wow, okay, call me after it's over.
Wait a minute. So had you already come out to her? Did she know?
She
Or was
didn't
that
know, but
news to her?
she suspected. We're
Okay.
close.
All right.
So, she was supportive.
Okay.
So I told my parents. That didn't go well. It went exactly as I expected it would go. And then I told my brother, and it went worse with my brother. Yeah. Yeah.
Is he or was he religious?
It's not so much that he's religious, it's that he just doesn't understand and doesn't want to understand to this day. So that was tough. But that was probably one of the most healing things that I had done, because suddenly I was not carrying a secret anymore. I was not carrying this news that nobody could know. And it was liberating. Absolutely liberating.
Were you close to him before you came out or not?
No, he's 15 years older than I am, so
Okay.
we were never really close. My sister's 12 years older than I am, and she and I were close, but my brother and I weren't. He was off to college by the time I was able to make any memories. So, it's cordial, but there's nothing close in that relationship.
So you were the baby of the family
Oh, yes.
and you were gay. How many times have I heard this?
Yes.
What's the deal?
I don't know. But I was also kind of the golden child in my sister's eyes, because she never saw that I was a good kid. She knew I wasn't I wasn't a troublemaker or anything, but she never saw that I was a straight A student and did everything that was expected of me. And so my parents were pretty reasonable with me. They let me have more freedom than they let her have when she was the same age I was. So she only saw this golden child who got lots of liberty from my parents, but I think I earned that liberty from my parents. So, there's lots of, when you have kind of two generations of families, there's lots of difference between the way that parents raise kids in that intervening period of time. So
I was just thinking, because I have 3 kids. It's like by the time the third one rolls around, it's like, it'll work out.
yes, free range. But I mean, that's really the whole coming out story is that it took me years to get to the point that I could reconcile who I was with my beliefs about religion. And it was a few years after I came out that I decided I had to leave, probably a year after I came out that I decided I had to leave my parents' church. And then I went and found another Baptist church that was far more liberal than my parents' church. But I only stayed there a few short years. And then I said, why am I doing this? This is not who I am anymore. And so that's when my spiritual world began to expand. I began to understand there was much more to life than being a Southern Baptist.
Really?
Shocking, I know.
Shocking. It's totally shocking.
Yeah.
All right. So you were in your 20s when you had your first gay experience?
I was. And I mean, this is part of that good kid routine that I played, because
Right.
I thought, I'm carrying this secret that nobody can know. So I can't do anything to get myself in trouble, or else everything will come out and I'll be found out and I'll be run out of town on a rail. So it was part of that tightly held image that I'd created for myself that I was holding on to. There's a twist here though, because when I told you I thought I was going to be a minister, that revelation came to me when I was 6 or 7 years old, about the same time that I realized I was gay. Coming up to seminary, the end of my college career in seminary, when I thought, what am I going to do? I'm supposed to be minister of music. I was totally lost about what I was going to do with my life. And suddenly my purpose was shattered. It no longer had any meaning to me. But things being what they are, and me being able to recognize through the help of people and friends and a larger circle of musicians in Fort Worth, I came to realize that my purpose didn't have to be connected to a specific church, religion, faith, or anything. My purpose could just be my purpose. And so my purpose is to be of service to people. And I did that first as a banker, then for 20 years in the nonprofit sector. And now I do it as a coach, supporting people to be resilient after trauma, to develop human-centered leaders, and to help people transform their lives.
So when did you leave Texas?
When I was 40, I stayed in Texas for a long,
Well, and you were in Fort Worth that whole time?
the whole time. Yeah. Fort Worth is a strange place. A lot of people grow up there and stay there for life. Not many of my peers in high school left Fort Worth for good early on, but a few of us did, or a few did, and then I followed later when I was 40,
Right.
and I'm so glad I did.
So did you go from Texas to Palm Springs or what?
No, Washington D.C. I lived in
Okay.
Washington D.C. for 10 years, which is where I met Sanj, and
Okay.
we were together there for a few years before we decided to move here.
Where did you meet?
We met at a bar, and we met, and I was with my ex-boyfriend, my boyfriend at the time, who was his neighbor. And then that was the last time I saw Sanj for a while. And then I was chatting with somebody online, and we decided to meet for a date. And we were sitting across the table from each other, and it was the coldest night of the year in DC ever, ever, ever. It was like 12 degrees, and the wind was howling, and I didn't have a car. So I was walking to this restaurant where I was going to meet Sanj, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to go home. But something in me said, no, go to the restaurant, go to the restaurant. So I trudged through the cold and the wind and got
So
to,
it was Sanj that you were meeting.
yes.
So you had broken up with a boyfriend at that point.
He moved off to Europe at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a tumultuous few years. But we were sitting across the table from each other, and we both said, where have we met before? This is too familiar. And then all roads lead back to Mark. So Mark was Sanj's neighbor. He was my boyfriend, and poof, there's the story. Yeah, and we've been together ever since.
That was how long ago?
I made all my mistakes, not all my mistakes, but I made my stupid relationship mistakes before I was 40, thank goodness. And now it's about healing and growth and community.
And how long have you two been together now?
Let's see, almost 18 years. Together 18 years and married for coming up on 16 years.
Cool. So you went from DC to Palm Springs?
Yes.
And what brought you here?
Palm Springs. It's beautiful. We'd both been here separately and together. We actually tried to move here in 2007 or 2008, I guess it was. No, it was right after the crash, 2009. We tried to move here in 2009. We got all of our money together. There was a condo that was ready, and we were going to go, and we thought we'd at least buy a vacation property. And we couldn't get financing because the condo complex was in possession of the bank, so they weren't financing. So that fell through. We knew we wanted to live here, and so a few years later, we said, "Why are we staying in Washington when we want to be on the West Coast?" So we just put ourselves on a 3-year plan. If at the end of 3 years we're not in Palm Springs, we're just going to cut ties and go. Sanj sent a resume out here, to the first employer that he saw that was hiring, and he got the job, and we were here in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. We were in the middle of a house remodel in DC too. So lots of things had to be wrapped up and tidied up, and boy, it felt like a whirlwind to get out here.
So you had to sell the DC place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 09 or 10 or whatever it was wouldn't have been a good time to do that.
No, it wouldn't have been. And the place at that time, we thought we'd just have a vacation house out here. But when we were decided we were going to move, we were going to move, and that was all there was to it. Lots of our friends were like, "Aren't you scared to move across the country? What if things don't work out?" And we were like, "If things don't work out, they don't work out. We find another place to live. So what?"
Right. Exactly.
It didn't dawn on us to be scared to come out here.
Living from a fear-based perspective is not a good idea.
It is really challenging, and I at times find myself doing it too, even though I don't really think I have a lot of fear. At times I find myself thinking, "What am I fearful of this? There's nothing to be afraid of. I can just do this. I don't have to have anybody's permission except my own."
I just heard a quote. I forget who said it or where I heard this, but they said something like, "I've had a lot of trauma in my life that never happened."
Well, lucky for that person, because
But I mean, they've had trauma, but the point was that it's always all in their head. and they worried about it and did all this crap, and nothing came to be. It was
Well,
like, you can't live there.
as Brene Brown says, you can't dress rehearse tragedy.
Huh. Although some people do.
Some people do, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I mean, we all tend to catastrophize to some degree because
Right.
when I see a challenge in front of me, I think, what's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? And let me average that out in the middle, and that's where I'll aim for. But some people never get beyond that worst thing that could happen, and then they bring about what they don't want.
Okay, let's talk about your work. So you went from banking to coaching. Was that the jump, or
No,
was
no,
there
no. There were
something in
lots of
between?
banking, and then I went into the nonprofit sector and worked there for
That's
20
right.
years. And the nonprofit sector was good to me. It was a place where I found purpose, where I found meaning, where I found community, where I found fulfillment in my work. And I had only two jobs in the nonprofit sector that I absolutely hated. And it wasn't that I hated the job, it was that I hated the toxic environment in which I had to work. And so, the work was good, the environment was terrible, it was awful, stifling. And so, I did what any person in a toxic environment would do. I left as soon as I could. I got such great experiences working in the nonprofit sector. The last job I had in Washington, I was the compliance officer for AIDS United. And in my portfolio of programs, I had grantees all across the country who were doing innovative things for everything from prevention through primary care, through, all kinds of ways to prevent HIV from happening and care for people with HIV. And I got to see lots of great clinical operations and organizations that were doing cool, cutting edge, innovative, groundbreaking, fun work. And I got to be part of that. And I was so fortunate and so grateful that that was what I got to do for a living, was travel around and support these organizations that were doing good things. It was fantastic. I
Yeah.
loved it.
One day you said, "I love this, but I want to do."
One day we said, I love this, but it's time for us to move to Palm Springs.
Okay.
So when I learned that my job wouldn't travel with me, that's when I decided I had to become a coach. So that's I'm in my third career, which is really all my careers have been about have been about being of service to people.
So talk about it. What do you do?
In my practice,
Yep.
I see people who have come from, who have had traumatic events in their past. Most of my expertise, because it's my personal experience, is working through spiritual and religious trauma. I didn't even recognize that what I had experienced in my life was trauma until a few years ago. And when I did, boy, all the things that I had experienced suddenly started to make sense. This was trauma. No wonder I have difficulty in regulating my emotions. No wonder this, no wonder that. And so it all started to make sense to me once I understood what trauma was and went through some healing to try to manage it. Trauma, once you've experienced it, it stays with you. Even after healing, it's still there. It's like an injury that is in the background, waiting to be awakened by a trigger. And it's in those triggered moments that you've got to have either really good rescue mechanisms or you go down the rabbit hole of trauma.
I've heard that trauma is carried in our cells. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it is. Everybody carries it in a different place.
Uh-huh.
Tend to carry mine in it was my Pilates instructor who helped me figure this out. I carry mine in my fascia, the connective tissue between muscle and bone, and it causes me to be tense a lot. And if I'm not paying attention, I will find myself in very tense body positions. So it's still, even though I've done a lot of healing and transforming from that traumatic past, my body is poised and ready to deal with trauma at any moment by tensing up and being ready to bolt or fight.
Huh.
I'm a fighter. I'm not a fleer. I'm not a fainter. I'm not a fawner. I fight. So
Have you ever done any plant medicine?
I've not, and I'm very interested in doing it. I've just recently we got a new friend who is an herbal medicine guru. So I'm going to be talking to him about it.
What are you gonna do?
I don't know. He and I haven't even talked about what might be possible or what might be good for me, but I'm interested in hearing what he has to say about it.
Yeah. I want to do ayahuasca in the next probably year for sure.
I want to do an ayahuasca ceremony too, because I think that there are still things that I have not seen yet that I would like to see, and I have to be ready to just see them for what they are and not be scared of them. There's nothing to be scared of because they can't hurt me. They're just there. I need to just look at them and say, okay, now I understand it. So we'll see.
So what do you like about your job?
It is supremely rewarding for me to have a client sit across the Zoom screen or across the desk from me and say, I know what to do. I'm not scared. I've got this. Because that means that they have moved beyond where they were when they came to me, and they recognize their own capabilities. And that is the biggest reward. I think I have the best job in the world for that reason.
How do you find clients?
I have contracts with, had two contracts with a couple of different EAP providers and one coaching, kind of a boutique coaching firm that works with employers. And some of those go on to become private clients, but otherwise it's my private clients are just people who are connected to me somehow or who have heard about me through my other clients. So lots of personal connections, lots of personal referrals. I don't advertise much, which is the next big place I need to push myself into to get some advertising locally because I do want more clients. I do want
Maybe a podcast would help.
maybe a podcast. That would be great.
Huh.
Know anybody who does a podcast?
Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. So talk about your job some more. So what should we know about it?
Well, the other half of my job is nonprofit consulting. I do a lot of work with local nonprofit organizations. But with a 20-year experience in the nonprofit sector, I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, and I bring a lot of real world experience to the table because I often find that what happens with nonprofit staff is they stumble into their jobs accidentally. They'd volunteered for an organization and suddenly they are being paid by the organization to do a job, but they've never had any training in to understand how to do their job or to understand what's different about the nonprofit sector than the for-profit sector. The other thing I find is that board members approach board service with great intentions, but they don't always know exactly what's expected of them or what the IRS expects of board members of not-for-profit organizations. And so I do a lot of work to help organizations focus their board expectations, board job descriptions, the work of their governance committee, their board, on what is expected by the Internal Revenue Service so that they keep their 5C3 status. Because they're very specific about what's expected and what kinds of things the organization has to demonstrate in their 990 and how they have to maintain, what kind of policies they have to have, what kind of procedural things they have to put in place, what kind of safeguards they have to put in place. Because really, in the nonprofit sector, your currency is public trust. And once that's broken, it's very hard to repair. And so the key is reputation and damage prevention and reputation control.
Right.
Go ahead.
You mentioned something about trauma before. Talk some more about that.
Oh yeah, that whole thing. I didn't realize it, but every time when I was growing up in the Southern Baptist Church, every time I heard somebody say something negative or derogatory about a gay person, I didn't realize I knew that they were talking about me, but I didn't realize that little microaggression would someday yield. And so that was kind of an aha for me, was all the death by 1,000 paper cuts, that's real. And every single person who said gay people are the downfall of the American family's value system, or, oh, they're too bad none of them are going to heaven, or whatever it was they were saying.
Right.
Every one of those was a wound to me. And because it was such a secret for me growing up, I couldn't say, hey, you're talking about me. So that all accumulated and really became trauma. And that is, I have what is called complex trauma, which is repeated and extended exposure to things that are traumatic for somebody. So fortunately, my trauma didn't disable me completely, but it certainly did leave its mark on me and how I form relationships and how I regulate my emotions and how I react to things around me. And most importantly, how I viewed myself. I never felt I was enough. I never felt like I was good enough, smart enough, measured up enough because I was carrying this terrible secret that I was gay.
Right.
Boy, if I could talk to my 17-year-old self, what I would say now.
What would you say?
I would say, it's okay. you are who you are. And that is who you're supposed to be. So it's okay. Don't let anybody else tell you that you don't belong. You belong where you want to belong. So that's what I would say to my younger self.
Or maybe a 17-year-old will hear this.
I hope a 17-year-old hears this. I hope a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old and whatever age, a 46-year-old. I don't care. I hope that whoever you are out there, that you hear you are who you are. You are who you're supposed to be, and it's okay. And there are people who will welcome you into their community whenever you're ready to join it.
So on the trauma you're talking about, do you think you're talking about basically it's from your religious stuff, the bullshit, right?
Yeah,
Primarily.
I would distinguish between religious trauma and spiritual trauma this way.
Okay.
Spiritual trauma causes you to lose faith in yourself. Religious trauma causes you to lose faith in religion. I'd lost both.
I was going to say, I bet a lot of guys have lost both.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the hypocrisy of the pastor who molests a teenage girl who is allowed to keep his job. It's the hypocrisy of the minister who pays for his mistress's abortion while his wife is languishing at home, and he's still preaching about pro-life, pro-life, pro-life. It's the hypocrisy that eats me up.
That's really bad today.
Worse than ever in my lifetime, I think. But that's not mine to worry about. I can't do anything about their hypocrisy. I can just drink tea when things go south.
And hopefully help some of the trauma
I'd rather help
survivors.
people yeah, exactly. I'd rather help people along the way who don't know what to do when they realize that they're gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual or gender non-binary or whatever you are, sexual minorities. We have to stick together because at some point we're all we've got. And so we've got to be unified in how we support each other.
So what's your take on the political cultural climate right now? Everything going on.
I have a sense that this won't last long. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a sense that it's going to get worse before it gets better. But then there will come a time when we turn the corner and it's going to be okay. But we're in for a rough ride right now.
I think that probably one of the biggest problems for me is the fact that half of the country is behind all this bullshit.
Half of the country is an exaggeration, I think.
Yeah.
We won by a slim margin. So there was no mandate.
And I'm not saying there's a mandate, but there's a lot of people that voted. And don't get me going on that, but I still think the whole election thing was fishy, but that's me.
Yeah.
You got a jillionaire buying up election. Come on, but whatever.
Yeah. And that same billionaire who disowned his trans child.
Does he have a trans child?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah. Musk has a trans child and he's disowned her.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's flip the switch and change topics here.
Yes.
You're right. You're writing a book.
I am writing a book. My book
is
about the human experience of joy. The reason I think, well, first of all, I asked one simple research question to about 250 people. And my research question is, my current authority on human emotions is Brene Brown. And what she says about joy is it's the most vulnerable emotion we experience. What makes joy vulnerable? So that's my research question. Wilkinson, what makes joy vulnerable to you?
You got me on that one. Well, I mean, if I'm projecting joy, then someone else is going to be jealous or they don't want me to have that or something. I would think that would be a problem. I don't know. Yeah.
You've hit into one of 4 areas that all of the responses fell neatly into one or more of 4 areas.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because we don't think of joy as, I used to think of joy as being like happiness on steroids. That's not what it is. It is so hard to define and so unwieldy that we really don't have a good definition for it. So in my book, I offer one that I think works, but I'll let you be the judge. And that is, joy is the recognition and celebration of what is.
I can see that.
In the moment of joy, it's both ebullient with emotion, and also there's an underpinning of gratitude because this is around you, or this is what you're experiencing in this moment. So that's my definition of joy. The 4 areas that responses to my research question fell into were authenticity, control, conditioning, and self-worth.
We could have a chapter on each of those, I'm sure.
I do. Authenticity was by far the most popular response. And You know,
How so?
I think something like 50%, almost 50% of the responses included some reference to authenticity. And that is, if I'm being joyful, that's my authentic self showing, and I don't know how to handle that.
Well, what came up for me when you're talking about that is I was thinking, really, to be joyful, you have to be in the present.
Yeah, you do. You have to
Because
be.
you're I mean, you're not. I mean, maybe you'd be happy if you're thinking about something good that might happen in the future, or oh, that was really nice, the warm puppy in my past. But really, you need to be grounded and present, I would think.
You do. And joy is momentary. We don't have any control over it. We don't have any way to know when it's coming or when it will leave us, but it's there, and it's there for a flash. And so if you're not present, you don't get to see it. You don't get to experience it, which also relates to trauma, because trauma takes you out of the present into another time. And if you aren't present, you can't experience joy. Yeah, it's fascinating. But I do explore all four of those areas in some detail. And, uh, the self worth one is the one that troubles me the most, because I think one of the things that I took away from religion was I'm not worthy. And that's followed me for all my life. But one of the things I think joy does is it reveals to you your wholeness, your perfection, and we're unprepared to see that
Right.
and experience it. So that's one of the great mysteries of this emotion that we call joy.
When do you think your book will be finished?
I'm optimistic I can do it this year. It's been a hard write because there's a lot of healing that I had to do to write it, and I've been writing on it for 2 years now. So I'm at a point where I think I can finish it this year now. So I'm energized about it again. When I first decided to do it, I was what I call scare-sighted, both scared and excited at the same time.
Right.
And
Okay.
I got a good chunk of it written in that first year, and then I hit a point where something triggered me, and I thought, I'm not ready to write this chapter yet. So I had to take some time off and do some more healing and come back to it. And I've not been as committed to it since then. But once I realized a few weeks ago how close I am to having my shitty first shitty first draft manuscript complete, I've got more energy for it now. So I think I can crank it out.
Have you been in touch with any publishers? You're going to go self to start, or what?
I have. I am planning to publish through, now I can't remember the name of the publishing company. She's an independent publisher in Connecticut, and she's a certified lesbian gay business enterprise as well. She reached out to me a few years ago before I decided to write a book and said, I'm new to the Gay and Lesbian Chamber. I'm just introducing myself to people, and I'm interested in hearing about your business.
Oh.
It's Genty Grace, and Publish Your Purpose is the name of the publisher. And that's who's going to publish my book. So I'm excited.
Is she saying, where's the manuscript? Let's go. Come on.
She's not putting any pressure on me. I'm putting pressure on myself. Okay. She gets it. She's written her own books. She knows that sometimes it takes a while to get a book out of yourself. But I think the first book is the hardest. And so if I can get the first book done, there might be a second book in me. I don't know.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
What else do you want to share?
One of the things that I think has helped me in managing my life after I realized that and healed from trauma is mindfulness. And so I want to talk a little bit about what mindfulness is and what it involves and what it entails and what's required of you if you're going to practice mindfulness. Because it's more than meets the eye. Mindfulness is actually the active management of 7 different things that are part of our human experience.
Really?
Managing attention, managing automatic patterns, managing conflict and acceptance, managing our goals in the future, managing compassion, and managing our ego. And all 7 of those things get in the way. So it's a fascinating way to, and this is not my doing. I'm a mindfulness instructor, was trained by positive psychology, and their training is really, really dynamic, I think. But it's something that I teach to my clients. And one of the things that probably the biggest and hardest thing to wrangle, it's the top 2, attention and automatic behaviors. Our attention wanders all the time, but it can be trained, and it's a constant thing. And the way I relate it, it's just like healing is a choice that you make every day. Mindfulness is a choice that you make every minute of every day in order to practice it well. It's a practice because it is an ongoing development in your life.
So what is mindfulness to you? What's the definition of it?
It's holding your undivided attention on something moment by moment without judgment to understand what's happening right now. That's it. Simple. It's presence, but it's more than presence. It's actively giving yourself permission to be present without having anything else get in. I don't know if you remember the Myers-Briggs test.
Oh, yeah.
I all my life have tested as an ENTJ, and that TJ, the thinking and judgment part, is what I battle a lot. It took me years to get judgment under control. And every now and then I'll still say something and I'm like, why am I going back there? But judgment is really, I think that's one of the things that I notice in today's political discourse is so much judgment about everything.
So on Myers-Briggs though, is judgment really what we think of when we say judgment? It's different.
Is the need to have a label or the need to do things a specific way. It's the rules kind of thing. If you're a rule follower, you probably are heavy in judgment because there's a right way, there's a wrong way. Except that's not true either. There are lots of right ways. There are lots of wrong ways. It's just that you don't have to label it.
So is ENFJ a thing?
Yes,
I think that's what I am.
You're a feeler, not a thinker.
Yeah.
And
but I'm also a thinker.
Of course you are. But
yeah,
that's your predominant thing is feeling. And what's funny is we are feeling creatures who think, not thinking creatures who feel. So somehow my thinking took over my feeling, and which led to years of having emotional experiences from.
When I owned my own business, and when I was up in the Northwest, I had a real estate company. And the coach that I had, so Gene Myers came in town and it was like a brain test. You know about this one? So, and this was like, I don't know how many years ago, a long time ago. But yeah. So the deal was, I mean, everything's in a quadrant. So it'd be like right brain would be like artist. No, wait. So salesman, pastor is one, artist, engineer, accountant. So the deal was find out where you are like 80%. Of course, salesman, minister. Of course, that's where I was, a little over it. But on the opposite, which I think it might have been the accountant, I was just under 80. And on the other two, I was at 80. It was like really weird, like all four.
Wow. You're like a perfectly balanced being.
Well, the thing is, he said that's a perfect profile for a CEO, actually, because you get along with everybody. However, and this is the thing that helped me the most, is I realized that the right brain and the left brain were fighting each other up here. For example, I'm in my real estate business, so I'm very entrepreneurial. So I have all these creative ideas, and then the accountant in me is going, hell no.
Yeah.
Too much money, you can't do that. Or I'd want to go in my den and read a book, but I'd have to straighten the den before I could sit down and relax to read the book. So but once I realized that, and all these reports I was having myself do, which was making me crazy. I mean, you got to do your taxes, you got to do the multiple listing stuff. That's it. The other reports, I don't need them. It's me. I'm the boss. I'm not doing it. So it really changed things for me. It was really good.
Huh. It's interesting. I've never done any testing like that except for the Myers-Briggs.
Right.
But I'd be curious. I mean, I love to find out about myself. It's this kind of, I mean, I look at myself as an onion that you have to peel the layers through to understand yourself. And while I've come a long way, I still recognize that there's so much more to really understand about self. And, that's when I teach mindfulness, one of the ways I teach it is first become aware of what you are and how you respond and what's going on with you. Because awareness is the first step. If you're not aware, you can't do anything with it. But building your awareness of yourself is really important. That applies regardless of whether you're practicing mindfulness. We often did find myself going through life without much awareness happening. I was on automatic pilot so much, and I missed a lot of things in life. So, understanding what awareness is and how to build it for myself, how to cultivate it, how to hold it, how to treasure it has really been kind of an eye opener for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. We're at the point where I ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
What have you learned in your life? What do you live by? What are your guardrails?
Gosh, one of the things I've learned in life is that the more I learn, the more learn there is to learn. So it's a never ending journey, and I'm glad I'm on it. My guardrails, kindness and compassion. If I stop being kind and compassionate to people, I'm in trouble.
Right.
I've lost my humanity at that point. I can't be a human if I don't have kindness and compassion in my heart and in my actions and in my words. So I really try to live by that. I fail, but I do try. And that's my intent, is to deliver kindness and compassion.
Kindness is my thing. That's kind of what I boil down to that.
Yeah.
Now if all of the Christians out there in the political scene would grab a hold of that idea, it'd be really cool.
Yeah. I want a big mirror to hold up to them sometimes.
Any parting thoughts?
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And thanks for being a great guy.
Thank you. It's been good. All right, sir. We'll put your info where people can find you if they want to know more. We'll
Great.
put that in the show notes and a little bit of a bio and stuff like that. So great. So thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.